we had to worry about to come together, safety concerns, time concerns, travel concerns, but I'm glad we could all make it. We have over 50 authors at 60 events at the library in downtown Missoula. We've been able to make this festival 75% free. Every event during the day at the library is free, and our evening events, we've been able to keep it at an affordable $5, thanks to the generous support of the community. I'm glad you're all here to help me open the festival. I would ask that as you go and explore this festival, look at the different things you can see and do. I would ask that you go to one event that you really want to see and one event you have no idea what it is. So as we go on throughout the day, we will be dividing this room. We'll have events going back and forth on each side. As authors finish up, they will go to their signing table, and you can purchase books there. I also ask, since we've made the festival so affordable, that instead of spending money on us, you spend money on books, because that is the real purpose we're all here, for the book. I'm going to invite up Debra Earling, whose book, Perma-Red, was just recently pressed beautifully. And Debra is such a fixture in Montana literature. She really does need no introduction, but I think this will suffice. Debra Earling, writer, titanic figure in Montana literature. Please help us send up the festival.
Wow, 2 years. I see so many friends out here, and I thank you all for coming. And welcome back. If you're not from Montana, welcome to Missoula, and welcome to our bookie community. I'm going to read a section that will hopefully remove us from the smoke and take us to another place. Many stories in Perma-Red are true. Actually, the stories that are from the reservation that really happened. And this one is, as strange as it seems, is actually it's a fictional character, but a true story. So, Charlie Kicking Woman, the Still River Place. The sky had turned yellow with heat. I saw Bradlock standing by the highway, and he lifted his hands up over his head, surrendered. I parked my car off the shoulder, pulling a fog of dust. Bradlock looked out of place in the tall grass, his baggy gray suit stained charcoal with sweat, his cocky brimmed hat. I had to look away from him. When I got out of the patrol car, I felt an odd swoosh of coldness just over my head that chilled me. I thought about the hours I'd spent walking the river line. I'd walk this river in winter, fall, and summer, knowing where the marsh grass pooled is sucking mud. I knew each big rock like the highway markers, knew where the fat trout slept in lazy currents, knew where arm-length pike leaped for flies with sure snapping teeth. I didn't look at the folks gathered by the river at first. It's what I loved and hated about small-town living. Everyone had license to rubberneck. I stood beside Bradlock, staring at the smooth dead eye of a cross-current and feeling the quivering bend in my knees. I went to the back of the cruiser to retrieve my drag line. Bradlock followed me around. I think they've got other plans, he said. But I ignored him. I had work to do, and I wasn't about to let Bradlock interfere. I slung the equipment over my shoulder. They were all just looking toward the river. As I walked closer, I felt the slick sweat on my back turning to salt under the drying sun. The water was so glassy, my eyes teared. Everyone was quiet. quiet as a photograph. I didn't recognize her at first. I was caught off guard. My ankles wobbled suddenly under the new weight. Louise was standing by the river with her grandmother's arm encircling her. She was shivering. Her hair dribbled tails of water. Her dark nipples bled through her river-stained dress. All at once, I saw myself in the nightmare my life had become. I tried to piece together what I was seeing, make sense of it. But this was like no dream I'd ever had. The day was blinding and beautiful, and I felt sick. I looked past Louise and her grandmother, past the small crowd gathered to gawk, looked past the cowboy spinning his lariat at the water's edge, not making the connection. I thought it was something, maybe nothing but river grass or seaweed burnt by sun. Thin strands of river willow boiling in a thick coiling current just under a smooth water surface. Up from deep-smelling water, I watched the snaking black hair. I remembered long hair, Louise's sister. All of a sudden it hit me as I stood with a hook wicked enough to barb a full-grown man, still dangling from my shoulder. A coolness smiled beneath the squeak of my leather holster. My spine was a needle dipped 40 below. I thought of Florence spinning down to the silted river bottom, her eyes wide, blinking back up at the mica-filtered light. Gone. I turned away from the river, placed my hand on my hip. I thought of entering that dark water, pulling Florence dead and heavy from the depths, feeling her stiff waterlogged fingers tap me as I reached to grab her cold hair around me like fish. Bradlock came up from behind and touched his hand to the base of my spine. I backed off so fast I nearly pitched into water. "I have a talk with you over here," he said, nodding his head toward higher ground. "What is it?" I asked, unable to mask the edge in my voice. Bradlock was quiet for a bit. He lifted his hat off his head, airing his wind-worn scalp. Then he looked at me straight. "They're convinced she's alive down there." He kept looking at me, and I began to think he was believing it too. He pointed to a group of men I had known for years, both Indian and white men, standing on the old Perma Bridge. I saw Sam White Elk, then standing up near the road with his back to the river, turning the straw hat he held in his hands. "Have a look yourself," Bradlock said. I put my hand over my mouth, listening. She's out there standing. Her eyes are open. They think. He began looking back at Grandma Magpie and Louise. "It's just the current holding her, I know, but her arms are moving back and forth like..." And he looked away from me when he said this and stopped talking. "What?" I said. It seemed too long a while before he answered me. Like she's gesturing for someone to save her. He leaned closer and whispered to me then, "And the Indians aren't the only ones believing this." I was confused. I wanted to go to Louise, but recognized it was not my place to be beside her. Sam White Elk had made his way to the middle of the bridge. He had bent over and cupped his hands to his knees, staring into water, as if someone had just knocked the wind out of him. Some of the men straddled the railing on the bridge. Others had just taken off their cowboy hats. And I understood that this was the small way of showing respect. Ordinarily, the death of an Indian, even an Indian child, would have gone unnoticed by the whites, but this death had caught everyone up. I knew this would be a story even the old ranchers would tell for years. Not a ghost story or an eerie story, but an inexplicable story turned sideways, almost funny, so it could be dismissed. I joined the men on the bridge with a burdened heart. I looked down into the clear green water. I could see the large round rocks, the smooth colors of water stones And then I saw her standing upright beneath the bridge. She was dancing in river water, a traditional dance, slow and sustained, dancing to a song we could not hear. I pushed back from the railing, felt the clank of the drag hook on my back. I didn't want to see what I was seeing. I was afraid these people would look to me for answers I didn't have. Logically, I knew she was just caught in a deep cross current, a current that was pulling her, a trick. But in my heart, I felt the Indian in me trying to understand what all this meant. I scanned the river, the length of the river, as if I could find answers. The river ran milk white over rocks a good long way, then seemed to stop and still to this channel that held Louise's sister. Here, the water ran deep and surface calm, thick as oil. Rocks shined, branches bowed deep to dark green currents. I tried not to look at the spot in the river where Florence's hair tangled in the twisting flow. I thought of this story rising from here. Florence standing in water with her eyes open and her arms reaching. They will say that Florence was dancing in the water, and not just dancing, dancing dead. I knew this story would soon lead to mistrust. I have my stories too. I have seen a sudden wind swirl up so fast it has a voice, even in a room with all the doors and windows shut, and it talks and talks until morning. I have seen my grandmother rise up above the flames of a campfire as she danced to become well. I've seen the medicine man turn his back to a crowd of people and turn once again to show his eyes colorless as silver dimes. And for the rest of that year, money had come to me. When I became a police officer, these stories took a back seat to small houses filled with hungry children. These stories disappeared when headlights met on a moonless road, or I found a young man sleeping under a white man's car on a night so rainy half his face was dark with mud. I looked up to see the rodeo man from Rive Creek and began to put the pieces together. A coil of rope was slung over his arm, another on his shoulder. On the curve of his hip hung a thick cable rope, black-green with oil and heavy-looking. And it struck me he was going to try to lasso Florence out of the water. I saw the long throw of his lean arm, heard the rope pelt water sinking fast. I admired him. At least he was doing something and didn't seem caught up in all the nonsense. I sucked in a full breath and let it out slowly. Something was tugging the end of the line. Then the rope shot back empty, skipping water. He reeled the rope in fast, looping it tight, a dripping coil. He cupped his hand and tested the water. Then he removed the heavy cable from his hip and looped it. I watched him lift the lasso above his head. He had to rock back on his heels to spin it, to get some lift. And then he was leaning forward, and the wiry line was flying, caught on a curve of wind, riding just above water. I heard the wind whine as the cable cut air. He jerked the line and dropped it clean into the water. I watched the river swallow the looping noose. The cowboy tightened the lead. He had cinched something. You could see the strain on his shoulders. He began pulling, hand over hand. Water was dripping down from the front of his pants, dripping down the length of his arm. I squinted to see what he was pulling. When I saw Florence's head lift from water, I rushed to lend him a hand. I want to thank you, and I want to thank you for supporting PermaRed all of these years. Thank you.